now going to go on to our next discussion point, which is the digital facilitated gender-based violence and using the online space to address gender-based violence by Ms. Olivia Niodusenga. I hope I've said it correct. Ms. Olivia is a team leader and facilitator at the Center of Analytics and Behavioral Change, with the bulk of her work at the organization being focused on facilitating digital activism, training, and focusing on supporting the He Care ZA program, which aims to engage men in transformative dialogues on gender-based violence, both online and in communities. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a late comer, just landed. And so you're going to forgive me if I'm not as fluent and structured as I planned to. It's good to be here, and I won't introduce myself, it has been done. But before I start with the presentation, I want to talk about a bit on the work that the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change does. You can refer to us as the CABC. We basically work across civil and social justice, but as well as on environmental issues such as climate change. But today, specifically, I'm here to talk about what ways one can use or organizations can use to advocate the issues around gender-based violence, but specifically using the online space. And as I present and go through the presentation, I hope that the organizations that are present here are going to be able to take the information that I'm going to speak on and see how you can take the work that you do on the ground within the online space. I always say the future is tech. Whether we like it or not, we have to be able to adjust or just to find ways on taking the work that we are doing on the ground into the online space. Most of the people are on the online space. Engagement is high than one will get, by face to face, specifically when you're working on the issues of gender-based violence. So at the CABC, we mainly focus on men and boys. Previously, I've worked on projects around gender-based violence, and I can tell you, finding men to sit and have a dialogue with, it's a challenge. I don't know if it's still a challenge now, but I know that many organizations still struggle to have men, and even if they come on in the workshops, they don't talk, right? They go over the issues and so forth. But when you take these issues of gender-based violence within the online space, we actually find that men open up and they share what they want to share on the issues, whether they are perpetrators, whether they are men who are advocating the issues around gender-based violence. One finds that they are open to having a dialogue. Okay. So we can start. So specifically, the project that I want to talk about is the project called Hikeza. And as I've mentioned, this is the project at the CABC where we seek to engagement in a transformational dialogue. And the main objective of having men and boys having a dialogue within the online space is so that they can self-reflect and see how some of them can advocate the issues of gender-based violence, but also those who are committing, violence against women, so that they can self-reflect on their beliefs and how they live their lives and see steps that they can take to heal and be better men in society. So this is the project we work. So at the CABC, we have three components in this particular project, or I can even say in all our projects. One is research, and another one is content development, and the third one is dialogue facilitation. So on you can just stay on the previous slide, please. So on this particular project, what we do, of course, I did mention that we try to utilize social media to engage men in a transformative and self-reflective dialogues. And so we do it in three ways. First, we do our own research on specific issues that we want to bring up, issues that we want to create to create content based on. And then, of course, what we then do, we take it into our media team who would develop content for, let's say, maybe the narratives. Maybe we could be wanting to address the issues of single fathers or fatherhood or men's mental health and so forth. So we start with research, then content development, and then we get into the dialogue. Next slide, please. So here are some of the steps that we take to actually get men on the online space talking and having self-reflective dialogues. One is that we identify change agents. So these are men that we find online who are talking about the issues of gender-based violence. We don't specifically look at men and boys who are speaking on behalf of women. No, we make sure that we are inclusive, even the men and the boys who are misogynistic, who are creating content to harm women. Because at the end of the day, what we want is to bring them into a dialogue. So we identify those men, and I'm going to show you how we do that. Once we have identified them, then our dialogue facilitators will reach out to those men on the online space. So what they'll usually do, they will send messages such as, we see you, we stand with you on the issues that you are advocating for, especially for those good men who are trying to help women combat the issues of gender-based violence. And we say, we stand with you, we are here for you, and we want to empower you to have skills that you can use within the online space to advocate for gender-based violence. So we identify the men, then we send them messages, and then what we do, of course, we provide training. I can tell you that you can work on the issues of gender-based violence for years and years on the ground, but when you want to work within the online space, you do require certain skills that you wouldn't require within the ground, right? So we give them the training, and once we have done that, then we create content that we can give to these men to use and have a dialogue within the online space. Remember, the idea is not just for us to converse with few men. We want to converse with those men, train them, and make those men change agents who can go within the online space and start talking about the issues of gender-based violence. Okay, so we identify, we bring those men in, we provide training, we generate content to help them to maneuver the online space and to continue to dialogue around GBV. And then, of course, we keep encouraging them to speak out. And one of, online space is a challenging space to work on, and specifically because you are dealing with people that you don't know. You are dealing with people who are rude. You are dealing with people who feel that they have the freedom to speak whatever they want. And so you need to really be able to not have a thick skin. Yes, you need that, but you need to be able to have tools that enable you to continue with the dialogue without feeling defended, without feeling like you also want to get into the fight, right? So one has to keep encouraging men to speak out. And then, of course, the main idea around the whole process is that we want the change on the narrative, okay? We want millions and millions of men and boys to self-reflect and to continue advocating for the issues of gender-based violence. Online space is the what young people say, it space now to really address the social issues that we are dealing with. Next slide, please. Okay, so I did mention that we have three components and research is one of them. So we have a research of, academics at the Center for Analytics who would use social media listening tools. We use Brandwatch, we use other social media listening tools to detect the conversation that is happening, right? So let's say so if you have been on Twitter, there are each day there are certain topics that will be trending. Sometimes within the gender-based violence, you will see maybe something like indota must. I apologize, I don't speak Zulu or Xhosa, but you will see something like indota must. In English, it's a man must, right? Or you would see something like this gender. Usually it's men referring to women. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that looks like in your face, like gender-based violence, but you can detect a bit of misogynistic on that content. So what our research team does then, they use those social media listening tools to detect those conversations. Not only to detect those conversations, but who is sending out those messages, which accounts are misogynistic, which accounts are pumping out that particular content. And once they have identified that, then they go on to the process of finding out the key words. So remember, I mean, you are dealing with the online space. It's huge. You could be dealing with a million, millions and millions of people. So one of the easiest ways for our research team to narrow down the conversation that is happening on a particular narrative is to identify keywords and hashtags. So usually the more you work within space of GPV on the online space, you are going to notice certain things. Sometimes people will develop what you call hashtags. Hashtag, basically, people create them for two reasons. Okay, there could be more. One, to gain support on content they are trying to push out. Two, to mobilize people to actually either be misogynistic or, so it can be a good thing or a bad thing. So the social media listening tools help us to identify hashtags that people are using and certain keywords. Then what they do, I'm summarizing, of course. Academics, they take their time and they have processes that they take. But what is so key here that I want to highlight, and I know that within the NGO, it's very important, especially when it comes to our funders. They usually want to know, how are you making impact? How do you measure the work that you do, and so forth. So when the social media listening tools that we use, we are able to actually see mentions. So mentions are when our dialogue team are having dialogues within the online space, we are able to detect how much or how many conversations they manage to have within the online space. The responses, we are able to see people who retweeted what our dialogue facilitators would have facilitators within the online space. This is something important, unique authors. So if you work on GPV within the online space, you get to know, for example, accounts that push out negative content. And when I say negative content, I hope there is no offense here, but if you know Chris Excel on Twitter, you know what he pumps out, right? And so we are able to detect certain accounts like one, Chris Excel and other people who are so misogynistic, who put out their content that is unbelievable in the most negative way. And so we are able to pick up those accounts. So the unique authors. And then what is also so important here that I want to highlight is the total reach. So this specific slide is what we detected within between August and September this year. So the reach, you can see 784.94 million, right? And the beautiful thing about these social media listening tools, you are actually able to develop categories, right? So within the gender-based violence, you find, for example, people who are advocating or talking about the issues of mental health. But for some of us who work with men and boys, what we are interested in is also to hear what people are saying about men's mental health, right? And so the social media listening tools are able to also help you to create categories, right? The trauma transfer, male ownership, like all these categories that you see here could be as well some of the narratives that occurs within the online space, and our team takes it and put them into categories. So sometimes they don't appear on social media as men's mental health. Sometimes people who say, well, men beat women because they have their own issues that they have gone through, which they have not healed, and so forth. And so they look at specific tweets that are similar and put them together, and we form a category of men's mental health. Okay. On the word, yeah, it's fine. We can go here. I think you have an idea of what you can get by using the social media listening tools. Now, as I've mentioned, when you work on the online space, you have to have a unique way, you have to get skills, you have to know how to engage on the online space. So for the face-to-face workshop, it's easy to facilitate because you can have conversation, you can see how someone is looking, you can see their body language, and you're able to maneuver that conversation because you can see they're responding, whether they're responding positive or negatively. But when you are working within the online space, you don't have that, right? You're having a conversation with someone you don't know what they're thinking, and so forth. So at the CIBC, we had to develop a methodology that allows our team to know how to approach these conversations, right? And this particular methodology was developed by a diverse team of psychologists, senior members, who have experience in mediation and so forth. And so it has been developed specifically for the online space. Now, one of the things that is key on having a successful dialogue within the online space is that you have to create a safe space. Now, someone here might roll their eyes and say, how do you create a safe space within the online space? You know, when someone, whether a person is misogynistic or not, when people can see that whoever is responding to them is not defensive, is not attacking, is not, basically that you are willing to listen, people on social media are more willing to engage. So the first thing that organizations working within the space they need to do is making sure that they create safe space. And I must say, this is me personally now speaking, having worked around issues of gender-based violence, or at least, mingled and having network within, organizations that work within that space, sometimes what we tend to do is to get into defending instead of putting the actual facts out there, but in a manner that is inclusive and in a manner that is willing to engage, right? So creating a safe space is very important. Two is understanding their perspective. you know Sometimes when I see what Chris Excel puts out there, I do try to understand. Sometimes I try to think, what is he trying to communicate? Why is he pushing this content out there? Terrible content, bashing women and so forth. But either way, you have to think and say, is he doing this for marketing, or is he doing this to actually develop a movement of men who are against women? But what is important sometimes is not to focus on the account. It's not so much of understanding the perspective of, the account that is pushing the content out there. Sometimes what is important is looking on the comments of what people are saying, what other men are saying, and trying to understand what is the perspective, right? So from that, then, you are able to find ways on how to engage such a person. The idea of having the online dialogues is for people to self-reflect on their beliefs. They are men who thinks, if they have to intimidate a woman in order for the woman to respect them, right? But you have to understand, where did that come from? And as you trace it, you actually see maybe their dad had the same thing. Growing up, that was the idea that in order for a woman to be submissive, they have to, sort of like create some sort of threat. So it's important that as a dialogue facilitator as well, there are people who are going to attack you, or if you are an organization, there are people who are going to attack your campaigns and so forth. But you have to keep in mind, in terms of the response you give on your campaigns, response you give on, the content that you put out there, that what you want is for people to reflect on their core beliefs, right? You want them to do the inner work. And so you have to be patient with people to be able to do that. And lastly, here is you have to encourage critical engagement with information. So the major part of the CABC is to detect mis and disinformation. We know that. So we have AI now and other tools that really enable people to put fake news out there, or create stuff to look to be true while they are not. And so as much as you want people to self-reflect, you want people to, you want to be gentle in your conversation, it is also important that you challenge the people that you are actually having a conversation with to say, if you are saying A, B, C, D, can you please share a link on a research that has been done so that we see that it's something that works or that is something that has been proved? So you have to engage with critical information as well as organization. Don't put a blanket statement out there. You have to be able to have critical information to support what you're putting out there. In other words, you are not just creating content. You are not just wanting to have dialogues within the online space. You want to have critical information. Hence, I think for now, I think organizations need to start working on having research teams within their, within their organization, so that, you work and do the work that you are doing, but with good information that supports it. Next slide, please. So what we have come to understand is that visual is very important when you work within the online space. Specifically, for example, if you want to push campaigns on Twitter, because Twitter and TikTok has become the media now, right? In actual fact, I was reading something that says now in South Africa, before people go to watch, SABC, ENC, and so forth, they first go on Twitter to check, whether that information is true. So what we have come to identify is that people want to see. They don't mainly want to have text and so forth. So what we do at the CABC, once we get some findings from our research team, so we go through the reports, we look at the findings, for example, on a specific narrative. Then what happens then is that our dialogue facilitators will take the insights from the research team, and they will create Canva designs or posters. So the posters that we create, we use Canva, we use Midjourney, which is the AI text image, to create striking images. And of course, within the GBV space as well, to get the attention and the necessary dialogue, you have to pay attention to the images that you're putting out there. It has to be striking. It has to be something that is going to prompt someone to engage on what you're putting out there. I think NGOs, they are still, behind in terms of how they are doing campaign. Of course, many of them now, they are waking up to the idea that tech is the future, and they have to look at, different technology tools that can help them in their campaigns and so forth. So creating content is important. Creating visuals in your campaign is very important. So, coming to the conclusion, one of the major things that we do at the CABC is digital activism training. And this training was developed, one, because we saw that organizations are struggling to put the work on the online space. So last year we conducted our research team published two reports number 7 and number 8, during the 16 days of activism. And we were looking specifically on how campaigns from civil societies are doing within the online space. One of the key findings that came out is that during the 16 days of activism last year in South Africa, in actual fact, there was more misogynistic content put out there than the good content from civil society. And so we train organizations, professionals, and of course those individuals who want to advocate something within the online space with the tools to be able to know how to navigate the online space. So our dialogue facilitators have been, offering digital activism training to organizations, of course, professionals, youth soccer teams, and guess what, taxi drivers. We also work with taxi drivers in KZN. Can you believe it? They also have cell phones. By the way, when we talk about social media platform, don't just think of Twitter, Facebook, and so forth. Think of WhatsApp. If you see what people are circulating on WhatsApp, phew. So we're also working with taxi drivers. Taxi drivers, I'm not going to go into details. And they have been really engaging and, doing amazing work within the taxi industry. And so these are just some of the pictures that, from our trainings. And I really want to encourage you to reach out as well if you're an organization. Our trainings are funded, so we offer them for free, to train organizations to know how to create campaigns and so forth. And it's important that I mention this here. The work that you do on the ground is what is going to make you succeed within the online space. Of course, success is relative, but what you do within the online space is what you are going to do to advocate that particular thing on the online space. So when I talk about digital activism, it's not that you are going to neglect the work that you do. No, you are actually using the work that you do to reach to many people. What is powerful about social media is that in a day, you can impact millions and millions of people in 5 minutes, right? Which you wouldn't be able to do within face to face. Last slide. Last slide. So, anyone, are we going to have a question?
Thank you, Olivia, for the wonderful work you do in digital activism. It clearly shows that activism and advocacy on the digital platforms are so vital and necessary. I'm following the Women for Change advocacy around the Chris Brown concert, and it's amazing the backlash that have been received from both men and women. That's the horror. I get gooseflesh as I say that. That's the horror of it. And so I'm keen to see examples perhaps of how you respond to such backlash when you receive it. And when you talk about creating dialogue, if you can also give us an example of how you have engaged in dialogue with such misogynistic attackers, because that's really what they are, and how it has changed, and if you have examples of changed behavior. And then the third point and comment would be is how do you enhance this to create almost further digital activism around this area? Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, on your question reminded me something that I didn't mention. If I would advise that you go on our website and get report 7 and 8 that we did last year on digital activism. Women for Change was the only organization in South Africa that managed to get the highest numbers and impact within that period. In actual fact, their numbers were just high. The only organization. And I suppose if you really pay attention to the kind of content they create, it's real, it's real. Just have a look on their Instagram. Um, you know, the question on impact, for example, how do you get to identify whether the dialogue that you have made has made impact, is so difficult working within the online space. And one of the things that we have identified is that you can make an impact in 2 minutes, or it's going to take you some time to make an impact. Let me give you an example of how to measure impact, one of the ways to measure impact. So let's say, for example, can anyone give me an example of a misogynistic content that they have come across? Anybody who is willing? Oh, there we go.
Like while we are in this indaba, we are posting on social media and also have our teams here. As we were posting some of the things, there was a person who said we were in this problem because you've given women too much power. 50. Yes, yeah, yeah. We have a problem because government has given women too much power. This 50-50 thing of yours is why, we are here and men are violent against women. Yes, I'm getting there. If we're like, I want to say as well, I like the presentation because I was saying to the organizers that we need to have a communication, uh, you know, time in the Indaba so that we can also share best practices. And I think I like this one of digital activism. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Perfect example. Now, how do you make impact in that conversation? So the impact will look like this. You have 50 people supporting what that tweet was saying, and then you are going to have, for example, 20 people saying, and not women, men. Okay. Oops. Sorry. I'm saying men because it's just what I deal with every day. But for you, the impact could be other women, So you'll find someone saying, can you please explain to me how has giving women power created this problem? So one of the key aspects actually to continue having a dialogue with people like that is to rephrase what they are putting out there. Don't bring in so much of your own words. Don't be academic. Don't put in a heavy English. Remember, when you're working on online space, you're working with people of all sorts of, from all sorts of background, right? So someone would say, for example, someone would question, how does giving women power created this problem? And then you find 5 people saying, I don't actually think it's giving women power that has created this problem. Perhaps our government has not empowered women and men equally. And hence, now that women are trying to do their best to empower themselves, it looks like they have so much power. That's impact. It's impact because you have taken that person to a stage where they're actually willing to engage. One. Second, they are willing to engage in a manner that enlightens the rest of the people who are going to come on in that conversation. So those are one of the ways to measure impact within the online space. But also impact could look like, I used to beat up my wife all the time, and I went for mental health sessions or counseling, and I no longer doing this. A person putting that out there on the post that you would have posted, that's impact. Why it's impact? That person would have not been able to open up if you wouldn't have put something out there like that, right? Hence, I've said it is really important to skill ourselves on how to maneuver the online space, especially when working with issues such as GBV, because not only that they are sensitive to women, they are also sensitive to men who are still going through trauma, healing, or men who don't even recognize that they need healing. And so it's important to know how to take them into that process. I'm trying to remember the last question that you mentioned. But we have really had so much success, people reaching out. For example, I've worked with, I'm going to speak for myself because that's the team I've worked with. I've worked with people who are incarcerated. They were men, all of them were men, and I took them through the digital activism training. And what these men wanted was not necessarily for all of them to advocate for GBV within the online space, but what they wanted is, how do they take their personal experiences that they have encountered in prison and advocate that within the online space? Some of them were raped, some of them were abused in one way or the other, or just the experience that they encountered, wanting to share with the rest of the society so that people can, But when you equip such people and they come back and say, actually people are engaging with my posts, men who came out of prison who were struggling to adjust and finding ways to maneuver within their communities, they're also wanting to do what I'm doing. That's impact, right? So there is so many ways that you can measure on how the work that you're doing is advancing and growing and creating impact. But of course, in certain instances, it's going to take time, but it just depends how you look at it. Yeah, most of the reports that we submit to our funders, we usually do take screenshot of, for example, some sample tweets, to show how that impact would look like. Because it's something, sometimes someone needs to see the process in order to understand the type of impact you'll be talking about. Yeah.
Thanks, Olivia. So my name is Vanita. I represent an organization called Rise Up Against Gender-Based Violence. We conduct dialogues with men. One of our challenges has been, because we do in-person dialogues, and one of our challenges has been, how do we, migrate some of that conversations into an online space? So my question is, are we able to access some of your content to use as an organization, and how do we go about that?
Okay, so we have a WhatsApp group of local organization and international organizations where we share our insights, reports. So if you, for example, require some of our Canva designs, we are more than willing to share. As you can see, one of the aspects that I didn't mention, they are unbranded. So if I put something out there, you wouldn't even notice that it's from an organization, right? Because the minute you brand something, someone already has their, their defense up. They want to fight because they will go on their profile and say, oh, is that organization that empower women, And so we are strategically in the content that we put out there so that we don't face such issues. But so you can join the WhatsApp group, you can email us, you can go on our website and get some of the reports and so forth. Yeah. Yeah.
My name is Peggy, Umam Peggy. Thank you, Olivia. Just a comment. I'm just adding. What if maybe you are talking about taking to the taxis, to youth, whatever? What about we people who are born before technology? Why can't you come and teach us? And especially Tina, we elderly people. Mina, I always think, but why are these kids doing this? I don't understand it. Maybe if we can get more of this information, will be much better. And again, the churches, especially me, in my church, I won't mention my church name. But they always say, they said a woman must be submissive to her husband. So I think, and if you don't do that, umama sambato, you are not obeying the rules of church. So maybe if you can also take that to the churches and even to the schools, because these things are starting at the early age. You find that kids are just getting pregnant because we as parents, you said no, hambo shata, it's better. What is your husband, your boyfriend doing? Is the family rich, whatever? So maybe those maybe if you take that teaching to us, would be, to us elderly people, or maybe if we can just call the meeting for a workshop for us, you know what I mean? And let the people know, because I did not know. As you go through, it was like coming up to me. Whoa, you know what I mean? This is how much it, you know what I mean? This must it happened, and I must stop judging them, because it was like, mina I'll put umthetho. So maybe
Reach out. As I've mentioned, our workshops are funded by EU, so we are willing. And when I talk about, don't think of, oh, we are not on social media, I don't use Twitter, I don't use Facebook. You can be a digital activist on WhatsApp. And WhatsApp these days, it's like a classroom. It can become a classroom if you want it. And what you have mentioned about churches, if there are organizations here that deal with the issues of gender based violence, please consider churches. I'm saying this because my husband is within the child protection space. He did his master's specifically looking on child protection, and his thesis was specifically based on the violence that occurs around children within the religious, environment. Do you know how much is happening in the churches on children that we don't know? So, yeah, I challenge the rest of organizations here to look at the religious space. So much is happening and it's just covered. And so, yeah. But please reach out. We are more than willing. Thank you so much. I hope it's been insightful.
Thank you. Very insightful. And here's a gift, a small gift, a token of our appreciation. And just to reiterate, this space is so important. And the wonderful work that these organizations are doing, we do need to put it out digitally, because it's what I continue saying, digital is the new currency now. So thank you for raising that. Thank you. We're now going on to the follow up from the CGE final report on the investigation into the state of shelters 2022 2023 by Ms. Liketse. Ms. Liketse works for the Commission for Gender Equality as a researcher. She holds a BA degree in Sociology and Development Studies from the National University of Lesotho. She has an honors degree in Criminology from the University of Pretoria and an MA Sociology cum laude from the University of Johannesburg. Her passion is on international treaties, reporting, research on gender based violence, gender auditing, and networking with different entities within the gender sector, to mention a few.
Good, I think it's afternoon now. Good afternoon, everybody. How are you? I'm fine. I know that I'm standing between your lunch, so I'll just be quick. Uh, as said, my name is Digitze Mohlakwana Mutope. I work for the Commission for Gender Equality, and I am representing the chairperson of the commission. She unfortunately could not make it. She had another agent engagement to attend to. And I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about because most of what I'm going to talk about, it has already been discussed in depth, but I will just try to highlight and be brief. The Commission for Gender Equality, I'm reading from my laptop. Yes, just to give you the mandate, which I'm sure you already know, our mandate, we are one of the Chapter 9 institutions as well, and provided for under Section 181 of the Constitution, as and with other Chapter 9 institutions, and our mandate is articulated under Section 187 of the Constitution, as well as our Commission for Gender Equality Act 39 of 1996 as amended. And I'll just directly zoom into what we are talking about here, which is part of the CGE mandate, where the Commission undertook an investigation, which is part of its mandate, to investigate the situation of shelters in the country. As said, this is just during the financial year 2018-2019, the Commission undertook a systemic investigation into the state of shelters in South Africa. And this was initiated because of the complaints that were received by the Commission at that time, and the inadequate and misaligned funding models for the shelters. So the Commission observed that there were, from the complaints that they received, that there were deep-rooted systemic challenges that needed to be addressed at strategic level of these institutions that offer services for victims and survivors of gender-based violence. And because of that, then now the investigation was executed. So the investigation was focused on different departments. So the Commission for Gender Equality called the heads of the 9 provincial department of heads of provincial department of social development, and they also called the DG of the DSD. They also called in the DG of the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, and as well as the DG of the National Department of Human Settlement, and National Commissioner of the South African Police Service, as well as the DG of the Department of Health. The purpose was for them to come and account before the Commission and respond to the questions regarding how shelters are allocated resources and any other aspects regarding the functioning and the coordination of shelters, including the need for transitional housing. So, providing a brief background from the issues that were unearthed during the investigation that the CGE conducted, the Commission made various findings and recommendations aimed at creating a healthy and enabling environment free from harassment, indignity, as well as secondary victimization and inequality. So the recent report, which is the 2022 and 2023 report, it summarizes the Commission's investigation into the state of shelters and provides successes and challenges in the implementation of the investigation that I'm sure most of you already know about it, of the 2018-2019. So the commission went back to establish whether the recommendations that were in that previous report were implemented, and as to what level and what were the successes or what were the challenges, perhaps if the recommendations were not implemented. So now zooming directly into the Free State province, the Free State Department, I'm just going to give you the the responses that the commission got as they were making follow-ups. They might seem structured, somewhere unstructured, but you'll just, these are just the responses from the provinces, different provinces. So the from the Free State province, the department, DSD, they reported that they provided information on the custom model that they used for establishment of a shelter in the Harib district. And they indicated that they identified a house, and however, they encountered challenges regarding the issuing of the title deed. So, and as a result, then the transfer of the ownership of that house, it was sort of it didn't go through. So as a result, the department could not proceed with the calling for proposals, meaning that they made an initiative, which is an initiative and responding to the recommendations. However, those nitty gritty challenges, they are the ones that are barricading progress in that regard. And in September 2020, the National Department of Social Development adopted a sector funding policy, which considered the Naongo judgment. And in its formulation, that policy, the policy represented a historic milestone, as it sought to provide a standard formula for servicing costs to aid in addressing the inequalities in the sector. In terms of the Northern Cape, Namakoi municipality, you will forgive me if I miss the pronouncement. Thank you for assisting. I'm concentrating now on my laptop and forgetting that I also have to move on that side. For the Northern Cape, Namakoi municipality and the Department of Social Development had entered into partnership to establish a shelter in, how do I pronounce this? Naba Deep. In the Namakwa district, yes, that name. So the Namakoi district committed to renovating an old clinic. They identified an old clinic to convert it into a shelter. And the department also managed to purchase furniture, and also took over the operational costs, which is one of the good things, positive responses that the commission got from the Northern Cape yes, from that area. Regarding the shelter, it was also reported that there were MOUs in place which were awaiting signatures. So, according to the Department of Public Works, there was a backlog within their own legal department, which resulted in a delay in obtaining the necessary signatures. So, I'm not sure because this is perhaps there is more progress now in terms of this all these initiatives that these departments were reported at that time when the commission was undertaking this follow-up exercise. And as well as we should also take note of the 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 issues that the disparities, I don't know what to call them. I think what happens between the departments in signing the partnerships, that seems to be common across different provinces, and as a result it creates delay in terms of process or progress in fast tracking the establishment of these functional shelters. So, in terms of the Western Cape Social Development held disability sensitization workshops in line with the CGE recommendations. And they also held a workshop focusing on the LGBTIQIA plus community and their respective needs in line with the CGE's recommendations, which is one of the key gaps that are still being seen even now, that there are lack of shelters for LGBTI QIA plus community, and that creates a challenge because it results in a lot of secondary victimization. Imagine if you are a gay man and then you are placed in a shelter where there are men because of your sex, and you can just imagine the kind of trauma that you as a victim that can do to you. So I think it is important that as we are having these conversations, we also advocate in the establishment of all this. When we establish the shelters, we also consider the gender diversity that is associated with it. And the commission also attended both workshops and found them to be well presented, detailed, educational, and satisfactory. Here I'm just also conveying the comments of the commission, the responses of the commission towards all that they received. In terms of Limpopo province, the department, I'll just say the department, when I say the department, I mean a Department of Social Development, because these abbreviations, they'll also lose me there. The department reported that it was engaging the local FET College Center regarding a service level agreement for them to offer the program on its behalf, and they reported that the delay on their part was due to COVID 19. So that is why there's a bit of delay from their end. And the Department of Public Works reported that they had a virtual meeting with provincial MEC and HODs of the Department of Social Development to make properties available uh, for shelters. And the Department of Public Works, they reported that they uh, they reported that 54 buildings had been identified in all the provinces, and that the buildings were in the process of being renovated in some of the provinces. They also submitted that the properties in some provinces were inspected and that they were waiting for recommendations from the Department of Social Development in the various provinces. In this case, we can see that the delay seems to be with the Department of Social Development to fast track that process. In terms of the KZN, the Commission engaged KZN Department of Social Development on the state of shelters in the province, pursuant to the findings and observations made by the commission during the information gathering process. And among the recommendations that the commission made was that the Dundee Crisis Center must move the recycling business together with the feeding scheme to another site, as both businesses were causing a huge threat to the shelter. uh, Also, this is important because I remember we have been conducting different studies, even research studies, as well as investigations on issues related to shelters. And I remember in one of the studies that we conducted, uh, uh, one member who was from the shelters said that their shelters are vulnerable to the perpetrators being able to locate their victims within those shelters, and that they need security, and that they felt that not much is done to ensure that there is security. Veronica was talking about somebody who was killed 4 days later after reporting and engaging the police on their challenge. So this is one of the issues that also need to be taken into consideration, because in one instance it was the police official who was the perpetrator, and his wife was taken to one of this was in the Free State. His wife was taken into one of the shelters, and when the other colleague was dropping off a victim, another victim, he saw the wife there. And remember, the husband didn't know where the wife was, because it was sort of a refuge place for that woman. So this police official, when he got to their station, he ignorantly told the husband where the wife was, and now the husband now knew where the wife was. The rest is history. You can imagine what happened. So those are the kind of things that need to be taken into consideration, that these shelters, they need to be very secure. They need to be, I don't know if discreet is the right place, but they need to be treated like what is this witness protection something. Yes, they need to be treated like that, so that everybody there, they get protected. Because if now the husband gets to know where the person is, even the owner of the shelter is now vulnerable, because that person can just come in and say, oh, so you are housing my wife here, and shoots them. Because of course they do have guns. Guns are just so easy to get nowadays, except we don't know how. I would get one. I'm joking. That's how insecure we are. You can't even go jogging after 6, because you're thinking somebody will just grab me and put me in their car. You see how petite I am. Yes, I'm a big, but they can just throw me in the boot and I disappear. People say she went jogging. That's how vulnerable women are nowadays. So another thing was that the House of Hope shelter also should also prioritize erecting a proper fence before it is allowed to continue with the services, and they managed to do that. They complied and erected the fence. That's what the response said. And what else? Yes, they erected the proper fence before it was allowed to continue. So the commission also observed during the engagement with the department that the Department of Social Development in the KZN had established a partnership with South African breweries, and that are receiving some funding there to assist them in finishing the new shelters. And also they were also told that the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure has facilitated the process of availing properties to be utilized as shelters. So you see that there's space, like Veronica was saying, there's money. So if there's money and that there are properties that are readily available, why are we not seeing the difference that we see on black and white as we read all these documents? And oh, I forgot. I'm on slide 15. You'll forgive me. At least I gave you the disclaimer that I was also born before. I was born before. Is this Eastern Cape? No, I'm done with the. Okay, I'm done. I want to. Yes, let me go to the Eastern Cape. Or the National Department is this one. No, after the KZN1, there's a progress on the National Department, which was yes, the National Department of Social Development provided the sector's final policy, which was approved, and the implementation was underway in all the provinces during the process of compiling this report and conducting this investigation. It was also reported that plans were in place to facilitate capacity building and training with the national and provincial stakeholders on implementing the policy. And I think that's one of the comments that we have had since morning, that there needs to be capacity building, capacity building, capacity building. And us now being in the digital era, we also need to make sure that we align ourselves with the new developments that we are seeing, because whether we like it or not, we are there. Whether we were born before technology or not, we have to learn so that we access the information that we need to access, and that we also filter that information to the beneficiaries that we are working with within our respective communities, because everybody needs to have all this information. And right now we know that everybody, they have the cell phone, the smartphones. And having a smartphones, it means that you need you can access information. So what are we saying? Are we saying that we need to be government needs to be subsidizing for data? That's a conversation for another day. But for us to be aligned and for us to have information, we have to be up to date and relevant, so that we also protect ourselves and we are also informed on what to do and how to react and so forth. So in terms of the drafted training and development framework, yes, the commission was also uh, sensitized that there was the process of drafting training and development framework, and by the National Department of Social Development. Uh, so the department then they submitted that. They said they submitted it to the service provider, and to assist with its editing and aligning the draft, that draft to the NSP, so that it can also infuse or be aligned with the national strategic plan on gender-based violence and femicide. Uh, the statistics submitted by the National Department of Social Development reflected the number of social workers who were recruited and deployed to various provinces. It had secured funding for the appointment of 200 social workers more. And I think it is also important that we advocate for uh, employment of more social workers and deployment of more social workers, especially as well in our correctional services. Yes, we know that our we are, as is now, our justice system seems to be, the more retributive it gets, then the more uh, perpetrator focused it gets, and then it forgets about the victim. So we have to really be advocating for retributive initiatives, and having more social workers, not to have the entire correctional facility relying on two social workers. Correctional service maybe that has 2,000 people. How can one person or two people be able to effectively do the work and be able to rehabilitate those people? It's just it's like a kind of tick box thing. We have to be intentional and make sure that the more they get a quality service and quality rehabilitation, we are just hoping that the level of violence will sort of relax. And in the Eastern Cape, we are on the Eastern Cape one now. Yes, thank you. The Eastern Cape Department of Social Development, they failed to report. Now, this is where we are about those who failed to respond to the commission. The Eastern Cape DSD failed to respond. Gauteng Department of Community Safety failed to respond. Mpumalanga Department of Social Development failed to respond. I hope National Department of Social Development, it's Department of Social Development. I hope that the national, it is taking consideration of these provinces that failed to account to CGE and report. Gauteng Department of Social Development also failed to respond. The National Department of Health, they also failed to respond. The Northwest Department of Social Development failed to respond. And the SAPS, they also failed to respond. However, from what we have seen, despite the fact that this many of the departments, they failed to respond to during this investigation, the commission it takes into cognizance all the strides and all the positives that came out, and how other departments and provincial departments responded positively on the implementation of their 2018-2019 recommendations. So this is just progress now going forward, that there was a meeting was scheduled by the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure Minister to meet with the Minister of DSD, but the Minister of DSD postponed the meeting due to their unavailability to hand over the inspected properties. So that meeting was about discussing the handing over of the allocated properties. So the delay right now, as said, is on the DSD part, as the Department of Public Works has already done their part in identifying places and renovated them, and all that is pending now is that handing over, which is not happening because of the delay from the Department of Social Development. And the properties that were identified and inspected in the KZN, they are there. You are going to get this. You will see your areas there, on which areas have been identified and inspected. In the KZN is Richards Bay and Port Shepstone, Free State, Klipfontein and Kronstadt, Mpumalanga. What is, yes, those names: Limpopo, Groblersdal, and yes, you can see, right? Those are the areas that have been identified and also inspected. And so, in coming to the conclusion, the Department of Public Works, I'm not sure. I think they really did a lot, but then we are just saying that they partially complied with some of the recommendations, and that they reported that the Department of Social Development is just really not coming to the party so that they can say we have delivered. So right now, because there is that, you can understand. So I think that is pretty much what we found out as the Commission for Gender Equality, and the department's compliance also contributes positively to curbing the high rate of gender-based violence and femicide in the country, by providing buildings to be utilized as shelters, and as well they indicated that they get a budget, they receive suitable budget whenever they request, and which is positive for the establishment of even more shelters and renovation of the existing shelters, so that they are even more homely. And remember, when we are talking of shelters, we also have to remember that most of the women who run away, they also run away with kids. So they also have to have child-friendly facilities, so that we do not, as the system, we do not endanger the children more. They at least get to have nice playing areas, if because the shelters, they are supposed to be the empowerment environment. Yes, we have those ones that are halfway home, but if you get to stay for say about a month or more, you definitely have to undergo a process of being empowered, because what we are advocating for is as Mayor Brenda presented here, economic empowerment is one of the key elements that will take women out of violent situations, because most of them, they stay in because of the dependency syndrome that we have on our husbands and our partners, and you wonder where you will go if you leave that house, where you will get your next meal, or what will happen to your kids. And recently, when we have been, I am wrapping up now as my laptop is also, it's already closed. uh, Yes, this was just, you can just switch it off. This was just to wrap up and indicate going forward and the partnerships that are established across the provinces, and how it goes. So there was this very concerning case that we came across when we were in Limpopo. We were conducting one of the studies on access, women's access to communal land. This is how far we are going. Remember that land is one of the economic resources. So one of the issues that were raised in one of the engagements we had with people there was that a man came the previous day. He came and then burnt the house with the woman and the kids in, but they managed to escape. And when they escaped, he knew that they were still alive. Then he came the following day. The most horrific thing that does not even get just the graphic way that that man was explaining to us, in the vicinity of many people watching, when that man saying, oh, you are still, despite the fact that he had beaten her to the pulp, he took the baby, threw the baby on the floor, and then the baby didn't die. I think the baby, they said, was between 1 and 2 years old, threw him again on the floor. I just want you to get how the injustice that we do to our kids. And then the third time, when he threw him on the floor, then the baby just died. People are not running to him to say, they are just putting their hands on their heads and until the baby died. So that also says the kind of the society that we are. So what are we going to do about it? You were talking, I'm not sure if it was you or it was you who spoke about somebody, the neighbor that was in the same kind of situation. But what do? We have to help the police to police ourselves as communities. I think that is our only way of sort of nipping this violence. It doesn't matter how long it takes, but if we work together as a collective, perhaps something can be done. Thank you so much.
Questions?
Thank you so much, Program Director. Yo, I have to respond. But at the same time, because I come from government and public works is not here, I cannot be putting a DSD case in this forum without the other party being here. Colleagues, I just want to say to the CGE as a maybe as a request that we deconvene DSD, Public Works, and yourself, because what is highlighted there, I can say now, it's far from the truth. um, and I don't want to go into specifics, but I will just request that let us be convened, Department of Social Development, CGE, and Public Works, so that we have a true reflection. And then it will also then assist that this very forum, after that engagement, there's a detailed report on these issues because it's not a good reflection. Yeah, so that would be my proposal, please. I don't know. I think responding to specific without public works being here, it won't be a good thing. Thank you.
And that's exactly what I want to say. You see, I think this country has been highly dependent on us as women being very calm and kind-hearted. But the powers that be are pushing us now to violence because this is not a Mickey Mouse thingy. And the report that comes out like that, it can push one to violence. We're sick and tired of, I think this is the question that is on everybody's mind. What is the role of CGE? Why do we need you? Because nowhere it came out what is going to happen if people don't comply. But we as civil society, as NGOs, we are forced to comply. And there's huge repercussions if we don't do that. So what's good for the gander should be good for the goose as well. The other thing that I want to ask you specifically as CGE, in terms of instructions or whether you would think it's requirements or suggestions to departments to get their house in order, when you go back and to follow up whether things has been done, in what manner is that being done? Because, for instance, it's very easy for DSD to tell you that, okay, you suggested that we employ more social workers, specifically in the field of GBV. But what is the quality of that social workers? Because for me, in a private capacity, they are referral agents because now they refer victims of domestic and gender-based violence to us as NGOs. Those social workers that was appointed as GBV social workers. So I would like you guys to please reflect on the way the information comes through and follow up on the quality of the intervention that these departments have put in place.
Thank you. My question is two parts. So the first part is that this report is the 2022-23. Reports have been started in 2018, 2019. And the same departments have not been showing up to these hearings. They're the same ones that have failed to report back since 2018. And this presentation was shown in the same indaba last year by a different official from CGE. So where is the 2023-24 board progress? Right? So that's the first part. And then the second part is in your presentation, you made reference to there is funding, and you said that the public prosecuting office's representative mentioned. But which of the Chapter 9 institutions have gone back to actually see? Why are we saying that these departments say there's funding? Like the CARA, for instance. The CARA fund, and yourself was there in those very heated discussions in the ISC about getting the CARA funds being used towards GBVF. There were lots of people in opposition. And what was promised in 2019, the NPOs that got letters in 2019 saying they were going to get CARA funding, are this year getting notifications that there isn't money, right? So, and that came from the 1.6 billion that the president promised, right? So there was never any follow up on that because the ISC was dissolved. So what happened there to that CARA funding? And why are the NPOs that were part of that now getting letters to say that they're not getting that funding? So what research are you doing around the actual funding that was supposed to be spent on GBV? Thank you.
I'm really at the firing end. However, I have a very good response for you. Remember that as the Commission for Gender Equality, we are a Chapter 9 institution. We are not implementing. What we do, we monitor. and we evaluate, we do research, we do public education when necessary, where we sensitize the communities about all the frameworks that are protecting them or that need to be protecting them and how to access. And we also do research. Our doing research is to unravel or to unpack more, to generate more knowledge on different gendered issues that seem to be a blockage or that seem to be creating blockage for gender transformation in the country. Another part of our mandate, we investigate on gendered complaints. When I started, I did indicate that the Commission for Gender Equality, they did not just decide to conduct this investigation, as because they received lots of complaints from different operators within the shelter movement, if I'm correct to say within the shelter movement or the shelter sector, whichever way we say it. And that is how they decided to do that, like to conduct this investigation. And this investigation, I extracted this presentation that I'm making to you now from a very long one, a 91 PowerPoint presentation that is in detail, because I looked at the allocated time for this presentation. We would be here for the whole week for us to unpack everything that was found on that. And it's that is the challenge. It doesn't mean that when we are the commission we don't bite. I know that we are well known or famous of being a dog without teeth. They are called, you noted from the presentation that the commission has engaged the departments. Remember that we report directly to parliament as well. So there are sanctions perhaps that the heads of the respective departments get, not perhaps not from here, but from the reports that we submit. This report, it was submitted to parliament as well. So those are what we can do. We hold different departments to account on what they are not doing that they are supposed to be doing. And as well as what we do, I think that is covering what we are doing with as the commission. What we can do is when we get complaints and concerns like the ones that you're raising now, all that we can do is just to investigate and report and call people that are related or that are responsible to be providing or correcting the situations as presented to come to the commission and to account. And if during the hearings that they are called to by the panel of commissioners to account, they do not provide a sufficient or convincing case, there is that level of accountability that is put on them as the duty bearers. I'm a researcher. Yes, I'm standing for my chairperson, but I can only give you in detail the operational and technical aspect of the operations of the commission. In terms of, I get your, can I get your concern. Remember, we send out the questions, or we send out the questionnaires, and in some instances engage with the respective departments when they are available, because that will also depend on their availability. And whatever that we put down and analyze is dependent on the information that as the commission we are given. And as you noted as well, there were many provincial departments of social development that did not respond. So it gets, because it's not like they will the commission will report that we did not get a response from just first attempt. There are several follow-ups. It takes the entire, sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years to get information and to collect data. So I will convey that message to the leadership of the commission. As you saw that I typed it in my computer to say it is really urgent for the two, you said the three departments, the two departments and the commission. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a token of our appreciation for your time. Thank you. I do note there were other questions. Due to time, we can engage during lunch. And before I call Dr. Zubaida, there's a current trend, right, ladies? And something that Sean said yesterday has stuck with me. We need to change from an asking culture to a demand culture. And from 2018, 2019, this is the 2022 report. So, what's our call to action from this? And how are we as a collective going to mobilize to hold these departments together with the Commission accountable? Because that rests with us too. Dr. Zubaida?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not going to be very long. Basically, we just want to share with you that next year in September, there will be the World Conference on Shelters being held in Australia from the 15th to the 18th. And we just want to share with you that if people are interested in submitting abstracts, those abstracts are due at the end of October, that's the 31st. And we'll flight a very short video briefly to just give you an idea about the video. But what I'd like to say as well is that the conference isn't just for those who work in women's shelters. Attendees can include people who work directly with survivors of domestic violence, family and sexual violence workers, anti-violence advocates. So it's really open to a very wide range of people if anyone's interested. And then I'll just very briefly give you the kind of the topics that they will be addressing. So anti-oppression and inclusion strategies, breaking down barriers and transformational change, justice and rights, knowledge and research, recognizing all forms of gender-based violence, challenges and strategies, resourcing and sustainability, safety, well-being, recovery and healing, technology, and finally working together. So those are just the very broad headings of what will be included. On the video, you'll see the website address. So if you're interested in having more detail, you're welcome then to follow up on that. Thank you.